right, so last week, do y'all remember what we talked about? What was it? Life with God, right? And we encouraged everyone, right, that you have to, do you remember what it was? There were two things. One of them was we have to get back to the basics, right? Because we all need to encounter God personally, right? So this week, we're going to talk about the second part of our mission, what life together looks like. But before I do that, I want to invite you to pray with me. I'm going to tell you that this week was absolutely crazy. Lindsay looked at me at one point and was like, why are you struggling with your sermon? There's so much to do. That's the problem. Phil had so much in his head that he wanted to do that I had to refocus and be like, God, what do you want us to hear from you? So my notes are a mess. My brain is a mess right now. I'm going to invite God to make sure he speaks through me, because if I just speak today, it's going to be awful, okay? So let's do that, and I'm going to ask you to pray for me too as I do this. God, be here with us this morning. Yeah, you know what it's been like this week as I've worked through this. And God, I pray that your words would be spoken, that your word would speak to each of us. It would nurture our souls. God, that most of all, you would be glorified by what is said and done here this morning. God, I ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So the other thing that we talked about last week was this idea that our mission statement, it's not just a statement, but it's actually a process. It's a process that needs to go on in each and every person's life here as we pursue a life with God. First and foremost, if you and I don't have a relationship with God, where we're not spending time with him each and every day, we can just throw the rest out. It's not going to happen, because you and I are going to be doing things on our own, and at some point, you're going to find you can't do it anymore. That it's not fun to do life together. It's not fun to go and do life in mission. It brings no joy to your life, because you've been trying to do it all on your own. I've experienced this. I remember years ago when I first started in ministry telling my parents, I don't like coming to church anymore because it's all work. And I work and work and work, and when I come to church, it's just like, oh man, I got to be here again. I will tell you that my life with God probably wasn't the greatest. I know it wasn't the greatest at that point. I wasn't actively involving. I wasn't pouring into other people out of what God had done for me. And maybe someday you'll notice that I might do the same thing, where I get distracted by the world, and maybe I would step away from my relationship with God. And I'm going to ask you as a church to say, hey, Phil, how's life with God going? Because we're doing this together. We're pursuing a life with God together and on mission. And just as much as maybe you want me to say, hey, you need to have life with God, I need you to say, hey, Phil, how's life with God? You need people around you to say, how's life with God going? Because that is the foremost part. It's the foundation of everything that we're going to do as a church. We're going to look at Hebrews 10, 24 and 25, and this is what it says. And let us consider one another in order to provoke love and good works, not neglecting to gather together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging each other, and all the more as you see the day approaching. When I read this, it appears that maybe life was a little bit messy for the church. There were some people maybe not coming together as a church. They were doing their own thing. And the writer of Hebrews is like, hey, I'm going to call this out, because this is important to our life as believers. And he says, let us consider one another. How do you and I do what we like to say as a church, life together in the mess? The writer of Hebrews is telling us this is part of what Jesus called us to do. It's part of your responsibility as a follower of Jesus Christ not to abandon other people who are following Jesus. And what we're going to talk about a little bit today is sometimes as we sit in rows, maybe we think we're doing life together. But maybe we're not doing life together in the best way that we could. Life together is a really important thing to us as a church, and you guys are incredible at this. I got caught up in a conversation this morning while you were shaking hands and talking together, and normally when I get caught in a conversation, I'm like, man, I got to get up there. People are starting to sit down. Y'all were up talking and enjoying a life together as people gathered around one God this morning. And that was super cool to see. But there's a problem that maybe you and I don't recognize. Or maybe you don't even recognize it's going on right here in our church. There's this thing called isolation. Have you heard about it? It's a really big deal in the world today. It's never been higher, which is crazy to me that people feel alone today when you've got one of these. But apparently, the world that goes on inside of here is not real to people. Because people, including in the church, 20% of you, when you look around, that means 1 out of every 5 of you, would say that at some point they feel lonely each and every day. And as I was kind of looking through my Bible, I recognized that this is a point at which Satan says, I can get in. Through this loneliness, through this isolation, I can get in. And here's how I know that. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness fasting. And Satan saw Jesus alone 40 days and hungry and said, I'm going to get him. None of you are Jesus. I'm not even going to begin to think how easy I would be to distract if I went 40 days without food by myself. You could probably get me to do anything, especially if you offer me bread, power, like Jesus was offered. I'm going to jump in head first. And my bet is most of us would too. When we are alone, Satan has an open door. And he is more than willing to take it. And that's where we really feel that life together is so important. Now, I don't want to make today about like you have to do this, we got to get into this, because here's the reality. You guys do it really well. When we talk about small groups in churches, do you know what the average small group attendance in churches is? It's 25%. Okay? And most pastors that I talk to, they're excited when their church hits that number or is just above that number. But what's not true, that's not true about you guys. Okay? There are, this semester of grace groups, 110 adults who are going to be involved in grace groups. There are somewhere between 30 middle school and high school students that are involved in a small group every Sunday night. Right now, there's probably 30 kids back there in small groups by their age doing life together with an adult working through that with them. Yet even in our church where that is the case, some of you are probably still feeling lonely each and every day because that's what the statistics tell us. Now, we could talk about how every statistic, 90% of statistics are made up on the spot. Isn't that the saying? Right? No, this one is a Barna study. It seems it is a legitimate study. And that's the reality of people sitting here today. Loneliness, though, isn't the whole problem. The problem is, like I said earlier, Satan saw Jesus as a target. When Jesus was alone and dealing with what had to have been some incredible loneliness of 40 days while he fasted. For us, this is why we work really hard to move people from rows. I'm way behind. We do that too. See, I told you, I'm a mess. It's okay though. I mentioned we purposely invest in the discipleship of all ages, right? We've got kids, students, adults in grace groups. Now we get to the next one, hopefully. There we go. We intentionally work hard to move people from the rows you're sitting in today to those circles. Because that's where we believe discipleship begins to happen. We like to say that we know people. I did this, maybe some of you guys sitting over here will remember this. Do you remember the first time I taught in student ministry? Do you remember what I did? I started showing you pictures of different people, and I asked if you know them. And I went through a few pictures, and students are smart, okay? It took them about 3 pictures to decide, yeah, we recognize them, but we don't know them. We recognize faces of actresses and actors. And I think we were going through a time period when Donald Trump was a big thing. And everybody's like, yeah, we know him. And then they recognized that we don't know everyone. And here's what I think happens in church too. Actually, I know this happens in church. This group over here. There are people over there. You have no clue who they are. Okay? I'm not letting this group off either, because this group right here, you don't know people in your own group. I don't actually know if that's true about you guys. I just made it up. But you might not. There's a realistic part of the size church that we are that you don't know everyone. I know this is true because sometimes I'm sitting at my desk and I see somebody came to church for the first time. Or maybe they finally, I don't want to say finally, maybe they engaged in something. They signed up for a group. They signed up to be baptized. And I yell through the open door, hey, Lauren, do you know these people? No. I don't know everyone. And then this is where this is just a little tidbit. You post way too much on the internet. Because I can find out who you are. No. We intentionally move people from rows to circles because of that. Because you can't know everyone. You might think you know them. You might be able to say, yeah, they've got 3 kids, and maybe you know their names. But you don't know the daily struggles they go through. You don't know what their relationship with God looks like. You can say hi and wave as you go by. And you can put on a smile and be like, what was their name? And ask your spouse, who was that? But you're not always known. And one of the things we recognize as a church is that because of the size we are, that you're not going to know everyone, but we want everybody to be known by someone. And that's why we work really hard to move people from rows to circles. Because we want to be able to do, as Paul said in Romans 12, to rejoice with those who rejoice. We want to do life together with you and weep with you when you're weeping. We want to consider each other and work to revoke love and good works in one another. To encourage each other as we go through life because of this last part. Life is getting harder and harder. The end draws nearer each and every day, and we need to look out for each other. Because we might have life with God, but Satan's constantly poking in there, trying to distract us from who God is, and sometimes we need people to do life with, to encourage us. To say, no, I've been where you are before, and God is going to come through, even though you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel right now. God will move. I'm going to ask 2 of my friends, and maybe they're friends of yours too. Maybe you're going to learn who they are for the first time today, because we just talked about maybe you don't know different people in different sections. But I'm going to ask them to come on up here, and we're going to talk just a little bit about what some of these groups look like. So, I need to get you a microphone. So what I'm going to ask you to do first, because we just talked about this, is actually tell us who you are.
My name is Ben Hipple, and this is my lovely wife, Alyssa Hipple. And if you don't know us, you might know our son, Finn. He is almost 2, and you can almost find one of us chasing him around after every service, and he might run into you. So
It's true. I've watched him. He keeps up with my kids most of the time, so yes. Sorry about that. You guys, how many years have you been coming to the church? And then how many years have you been involved in some sort of grace group?
So we started coming to Palmyra Grace actually back in about the end of 2018. So we were here right at the time that Pastor Dan Golnack was installed as the pastor here. We were here for about 2 years then, and actually got married at the church, and moved to Maryland then over COVID. Came back in 2022 and started coming back right when we got back. I think I actually reached out to you that first
did.
week that we moved back,
You did.
asking to get involved and stuff. So,
Yeah.
and then we've been coming here ever since. So about 5 years.
Okay. All right. And that brings up something I didn't think about, so sorry if this question is outside of it. My main goal is to talk to you guys about what grace groups and microgroups look like, but you've also served, both of you, in some form in small groups in the youth ministry. How was that experience?
I've always enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed helping out with the youth, especially because I feel like I am one of them still.
Do you agree with that, Alyssa? Yeah.
And the boys would probably also agree with that I am no different than them.
What do we think, fellas? Yeah? All right.
So I've always enjoyed helping out with the youth. We've also helped out with the kids ministry back there. I think you still are helping out. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so I've taught in various rooms, been in the nursery pretty much as long as we've been here. I'm a teacher, it's what I do, so it's kind of what God's gifted me with, and I'm grateful to give back here at Palmyra Grace. And now that Finn's in those classes, it's just something that we feel that we should do, and we really enjoy doing. It's important to us.
Good. You have the microphone now, so I'm going to ask you about this thing called a microgroup
Yes.
that you've been a part of.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about what it is, and what God's been doing in your life through that microgroup?
So I've been part of a microgroup, actually I think since last May or last June.
Okay.
We've been doing it for a little while. A lot of the same people in our grace group, but some different people too have come in and out. But a microgroup is essentially just a smaller group, and for me it's all just women in the church. So we really enjoyed our grace group and getting to know families there, but then with a microgroup I feel like just because it's women, we've been able to go a little deeper and talk about some more personal things that maybe we wouldn't in our normal grace group. So for me, I think the biggest thing that I've learned through that is accountability. I can honestly say that before I was in my microgroup, I wasn't reading my Bible daily. And now that I am getting into it more, I'm enjoying that process more, and it's become easier and just overall better for me. Yeah. And then also just getting to know people in my microgroup and feeling like I'm a part of something, not just going to church on Sunday and then going home. Yeah. I'm connecting with those people throughout the week. We text each other, we support each other, we share things that we're going through, and that's been a really, really big encouragement to me, especially since we have women in different stages of life. We talked about how sometimes we feel like we're getting so much from them, like they're sharing their wisdom, and especially with raising kids. And we're in the season of life where we're just taking it all in. We need to know. But I know that one day we'll be in that position where we can pour into somebody else too and make a difference.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you wanted to share too on the grace group side of things, how that has impacted your life?
Well, for me especially, having our grace group is actually, my job I found actually is because of our grace group, which is really nice. So there's a family there that they were looking for somebody to watch their son. And I was hoping to stay home with Finn, and they were actually able to hire me as their nanny. So that has been awesome and a blessing for us to be able to spend that extra time with my son, but as well getting along with their family, getting to know them more personally, but also like their son and Finn hanging out is such a blessing and just awesome to see.
Cool.
So
Cool. I've recognized lots of times that we can come up with reasons not to spend another night out of the house. And for you, Alyssa, I know right now that's like 2 extra nights when you're doing a grace group and a micro group. But if there was somebody here today who's like, I don't have time for that, what would you tell them?
If you can think of a reason not to join a grace group, we probably thought of it as well. We tried to, I don't know if I would say we avoided it because of any reason you could think in the book. I mean,
You did tell me that if you weren't up here on stage today, you would have used the snow.
Exactly, yes. So no, we joined a grace group actually when Alyssa was 8 months pregnant. So I mean, we were using the excuse of like, oh, we have a kid coming, like, oh, we're not gonna have time for this. We live 30 minutes away from the church, and grace groups are meeting like in Palmyra. So I mean, pretty much any excuse you can think of, we had used for ourselves not to join. And actually, Sarah Everly had kind of been the push for us because that's the grace group that we're in, and she had reached out to us and encouraged us to join and just even come out and give it a try. And so we did, and we've gone ever since, and we've really enjoyed it. So, I mean, I think just getting that, just putting yourself out there, I think it was kind of hard for us as well, just like to be vulnerable and to be like, oh, like, well, we're going to try this. So I think we we're a little nervous about, oh, we're going to be here for 3 weeks and then be gone for a few weeks. But it was awesome to join and have that support group. I mean, we had people showing up at our doorstep like 2 days after Finn was born, and bringing us food and dropping off flowers. And it was just amazing that like in a month of joining a Grace group, how quickly we had a support system.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think sometimes we think that we need to get our lives together before we, get into a Grace group or something like that. But that's kind of the opposite of the purpose of Grace groups. We're supposed to be there for each other through all seasons of life. And we've discovered that, having a little one. We're both still taking classes. So life is busy. It's not easy, but having a Grace group, having those people to support you and be with you through all of those things has been like really necessary for our marriage and for our family and just life in general.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. So you would tell them they should go for sure?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Sign up. Yeah, it was a little intimidating at first, like to go on the app and be like, well, we don't really know these people. How do we know which one to join? But just do it. And then people welcome you into their home and it's awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think that's better than anything I probably could have said. I love my group too, but that was awesome. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anything else you want to add to that before I'm going to say kick you off the stage?
so.
'Cause yeah?
We're good.
All right. Thank you, Ben and Alyssa.
Yeah.
Ben and Alyssa's story is one of just a couple that I know of how people have done life together in this church. My own life has been that way. The food they mentioned when you have a kid is crazy. We ate for weeks. It's a real thing to do life together and to see how God moves in that. So that's a picture of what we really want life together to look like. Just like them, I've been a part of Grace groups for a while. I've been a part of a microgroup where people have invested in me. I've been a part of microgroups where I've invested in other people. And Alyssa said this, and she and I didn't actually talk about the specific word she used. But you use this word accountability in your microgroup. And I think that's one of the most important parts of discipleship. Because as we come in here this morning, right, and I'm not coming down hard on you. Don't hear me say it this way. We put out questions for Grace groups, and I put out personal reflection questions last week, and I'm going to put them out again this week. There is no accountability in that, right? You guys can do them. You cannot do them. There's nothing there that says you have to. When we step into smaller groups of people, we step into those Grace groups or this new thing called microgroups that we've been working on in the background as we try to get that ready to be something that we can use to disciple people. Accountability enters in and we can hold each other up. Life will get messy and we're going to make mistakes. But when we come together and say, God's showing me this and I know I need to change, when the person keeps coming back week after week and saying, God is telling me I got to do this and I'm not changing, we get to say as believers to encourage one another to say, hey, you keep talking about this, but do you really want to do something about it? These small groups is where discipleship can happen. And we can live out what the writer of Hebrews was saying when he said, consider one another. I am way off. It's okay. Where we can live out what the writer of Hebrews was saying. When he says that you need to consider one another. To live in life together where you provoke one another. To do what God said. To love one another and to take care of each other. To encourage one another as we go through a life that gets closer and closer to Jesus coming. I'm going to use the word disciple and discipleship a good bit here for the rest of this morning. And I want to make sure, and I'm going to ask you, Chad, to help me out because I don't know what I did wrong. But can you get me to the definitions of a disciple? So a disciple, artificial intelligence is crazy. It's been an incredible tool in some ways, but it does things that I don't even want to know sometimes. But I searched for the definition of disciple, and I didn't even know artificial intelligence does this. But instead of just giving me a list, it made its own definition that it had compiled from all over the place. And if we can get there, I'm going to show it to you. Is Chad out there? I don't see him. Let's see what I can do. Yes. There we go. I don't know what happened. This is what AI told me a disciple is. It's a person who follows and learns from a teacher and actively spreads their teachings. So as I thought through that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to make sure I go back to God's word and I see what is this an accurate definition for disciple? And I'm going to be honest with you, I think it is. But I put in how I see it in light of who Jesus is. So this is the definition I want to run with for a disciple this morning. It's someone who has a relationship with Jesus, who wants to be more like Jesus, and who points others to Jesus. And I want you to notice, as we talk about life together and how disciples do life together in the mess, I want you to notice something that's not included in either of these definitions. A disciple is not perfect. Anybody in here got it all together? Your life with God is perfect. He has no reason to see you as a sinner and condemn you to hell. Anyone? Okay, there's something else there that I don't see in those definitions. Disciple doesn't mean you know it all. Here's the most common reason I hear for somebody saying, I can't enter into a discipleship relationship. I don't know enough. If you know that Jesus died for you, that his grace covers all of the wrong in your life, you know enough. You know enough to share with somebody else that you're doing life together with. As God teaches you more, you know even more that you can share with someone else. Here's what we are trying to do as we do life together. We're trying to put you in relationships where maybe sometimes spiritual walk looks a little different than yours. And they can offer you some help as you walk through certain areas of your spiritual life. And sometimes, maybe, like last week, maybe as we talked about life with God, some of you are like, I got that down. I've got this idea of spending time with God each and every day down. I pray to him. I'm in his word. I can tell when the Holy Spirit is talking to me versus when my own head says, do that. This is the point at which God is saying, I designed you for so much more. I didn't design you to just gain knowledge, to download information from your Bible and from me. I put you on this earth, in this life, to walk together, to point other people to Jesus, including other believers, because sometimes we don't get it right. Sometimes we have our own struggles and life gets messy. And we need other people to come around us and say, hey, I hear what you're going through. And I want to be here for you. I want to bring you food. I want to pray with you. I just want to sit and I want to hear how life is for you. And I also want to say, do you remember what Jesus did for you? Can I tell you what he did for me as I walked through my relationship with God as well? The last thing that we talk about is that we see disciple making as the call of every believer, and what I just said is why. I have to do this. I don't know where he's at. Elijah Foltz, are you sitting over here? There's a young man over here, and there's a bunch of other young men over here who are here because of him. Because as he walks through life, he realized the importance of life together, and he points other guys to Jesus. And he continues to do that. And we were just talking outside here with a guy named Shane, who was on stage earlier. And he just introduces them as his friends. No, they're here because he brought them here. They're here because he walked through life together with them at school. And said, hey, why don't you've been hearing me talk about Jesus, why don't you come with us? If you've ever met Elijah, he's about this tall. I think he just told me you weigh 106 pounds. He wrestles. How old are you? 15. We just get in our own way. As we walk through life, we have excuses. We have reasons why we can't. And Jesus is there like, I died for you. Walk through life with one another. Encourage each other. It's one of those basic things that we need to get back to. Now that I've covered what I think the church does, right? We believe disciples do life together in the mess. We purposefully invest in the discipleship of all ages. We intentionally move people from rows to circles. And we see disciple making as the call of every believer. I want to take a few moments here to talk about how we as individuals can take on this mission. Because when we talk about the church, I don't mean myself and staff, elders, deacons, and some of our main ministry leaders. When I'm talking about the church of Jesus Christ is us. It's the people gathered in this church. It's the people gathered at churches all over Palmyra, the state, the country today. You are the church, and we're trying to equip you to do these things, but we're asking you to partner with us and do these things as you go about life. You heard from Shane this morning, and I told him I'm going to do this, but I've told other people, and I did now tell him this morning, but I have told Shane that he's probably one of the craziest people that I know. Okay? We were just having a conversation in the lobby. Shane doesn't even wait for the door to be open to go through it when he's trying to follow God. He's going. He's going to go through that door. And when I first met Shane, we had this conversation, and I left it thinking the dude was absolutely crazy. And he is, but he's crazy about Jesus, and he's crazy about helping people in the ways that God has equipped him to help people. What's really cool is I got to watch when Shane called us up and was like, hey, can we use your parking lot? It hadn't even crossed my mind, what could we do as a church to help people? Shane's like, I'm moving. I need a place to park vehicles. We're going to meet there. Do you have the space that we can do it? Sure. And maybe later I asked, do you need anything else? Because as a church, I'm not that kind of leader. And we don't have that particular kind of leader in our church. That's not a bad thing. But the greater church has people like that. And like Shane said, we were able to jump in and just financially provide for you, which is awesome. Because we as a church, we're not equipped to drive down there, to feed people, to walk through different, I was going to call them villages, but are they even villages? Towns? To help people like that. It's definitely not a gifting I have as a leader to put all of that together, but we were able to partner and come alongside, do life together with another church, which is incredible in today's world because so often as churches we don't want to do that. Shane's crazy because he grasped this verse way before I did, and now you might think I'm crazy. Paul said to the Ephesians, finally be strengthened by the Lord and by his vast strength. Put on the full armor of God so that you can stand against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, and we've been talking about this verse for the last couple of weeks. We, as individuals who make up the church, have got to grasp this part. We are not in a struggle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers of this darkness, against evil spiritual forces in the heavens. The sexuality of our culture, the self-reliance, the isolation, the addiction problems that we all see, they're not just individual people's little problems. They're not just things that they deal with within themselves. It is literally Satan at work to say, I don't want you to know God. Forget him. Please yourself, do whatever you want to do. And we all deal with that each and every day. We all go through that as people who are trying to pursue a life with God. And too often, it's too easy to forget who God is. It's too easy to forget what he's done for me as life pounds up against me. As images, just as I'm scrolling through the news, go across my phone. And I'm like, ooh, that's attractive. Sorry. It happens each and every day. where Satan is trying to get your life. God defeated him, and we can defeat him through God. But Satan's not done on this earth trying to use you to convince other people to go to hell with him. And unless we grasp that we're not just going through life, and sometimes bad things happen, sometimes good things happen, and life is just, it's all a coincidence. It's not. We have got to grasp that God loves you so much and he wants you. But Satan doesn't want that. And I believe that if we as a church can grasp what Ephesians 6:10-12 is telling us, that if we recognize that Satan truly is powerful in this world, but if we believe that together, through our lives with Jesus, that we can fight back against him, and we can encourage one another and hold each other up and spur one another on to love and good works, that our community will notice. Your friends will notice. The people that you work with, the people that you go to school with, will notice that Jesus is alive and well in you. I want you to join us as a church as we strive to equip you relationally through doing life together in the mess. I know I'm not perfect. You know you're not perfect. But the reality is that we probably all just mess up in different ways, and instead of looking down our noses at each other, Jesus tells us to remove the log in our own eye before we pick out the speck in somebody else's eye. That if we do life together in a way that says, I want to build you up, not tear you down, that is life together in the mess. You can invest in the discipleship of all ages. As we go to 2 services, there are all kinds of kids ministries that need taken care of. You can jump into a grace group and invest in other people's lives. You could work with students at the middle school and the high school level because you've already walked a life with God. And God has shown you things that you can pass on to the next person. You can get involved in a grace group as we move people from rows to circles. You can jump in a small group in the student ministry. You can take whatever of those ideas that you have that Ben and Alyssa shared with us of what maybe it would take, how hard it could be, and you can say, you know what? It's worth my time investing in somebody else, and I promise you that at some point you will find it worthwhile to you as well as others invest in your life with God. And lastly, you need to see yourself as a disciple maker. You can be. Jesus gave you his life. He has a relationship with you, and you have a story to tell others because of that. You have the ability to point other people to Jesus. And church, if we do this, and the reality is we do this really well already. When over 60 to 70% of you are involved in small groups in some way, shape, or form, we do this well. But I believe that if we can be even more intentional, if we can get to a place where we can truly be vulnerable with one another, we can share how our lives are shaped by the things pulling on us from the outside, and we can share with each other how God calls us out of that. That God can do incredible things through his church gathered here. Would you today consider the one another's around you? Look around. Would you consider, go ahead, look around, not at the screens. Look around at the people gathered here today, and would you consider those one another's? And what the next step that God might be calling you to provoke love and good works in each other, and to encourage one another as the coming of Jesus draws near. Let's pray.
Thanks so much for joining us this week. We hope it will help you as you live out your life with God, together, and one mission. We would love to connect and pray with you. Feel free to reach out through our social media pages, website, or in person on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:45 a.m. Hope to see you soon.